Before I begin, I'd like to once again thank all of our judges, the other competitors, and Shanley High for a wonderful tournament and experience here at the International Public Policy Forum competition. This debate comes down to a couple key issues. First, we're going to talk about framework. Affirmative makes a big mistake between should and could. The way that they're describing it is through a could lens. Yes, mitigation, while mitigation could be implemented still, as I'll get to later, the debate is revolving around what should be done. Mitigation should be done. We should take all of our efforts possible to protect the coral reefs that humans look to for so much of their livelihood. We should protect the fishes that adaptation ignores under their policy. We should prevent the economic dichotomy that prioritizing an adaptation solution fosters. And so these are the questions you must answer when you're making your decision. What should be done? And that's clearly mitigation. That is the solution that best alleviates problems not only for the current humans, but also for current plants, animals, and also future generations. Now going on to the urgency question. Urgency should be defined as sustainability, and that makes the most sense in a climate change debate. Climate change is not a short-term issue, and so a solution should not only be a short-term solution. We must look to the long-term solution and importance of a mitigation policy, which is why urgency in this debate must be defined as the solution which best sustains human survival. As we've indicated in previous speeches, only mitigation best sustains human survival. Now, going on to the tipping point debate. We still have time to do mitigation, but it is essential to start implementing mitigation solutions now. The time for implementing mitigation is now because we are reaching this tipping point, which both teams agree is about 40 years. And so we must mitigate. Even if we go past the tipping point, we're still going to need to mitigate because we're going to be able to reduce the magnitude of impact of climate change that occur. Now going on to the ecological section. Affirmative largely concedes that adaptation is going to hinder ecological sustainability. First, let's talk about an upper limit to adaptation. Affirmative concedes that adaptation has an upper limit of 4 degrees, after which storms get so large, droughts get so bad, and ocean acidity gets so bad that impacts of climate change are no longer able to be adapted against. Human ability for adaptation becomes largely compromised, and adaptation is basically shown as a fool's game. Instead, we should prioritize our funding towards mitigation, because a mitigation solution allows us to reduce carbon emissions, and reducing carbon emissions allows us to limit the root cause of the climate change crisis. Furthermore, adaptation does not account for biodiversity as stated before. They do not account for the coral reefs, which account for such a large part of human livelihood, and other species that are bound to be lost by increasing ocean acidity and rising storms that adaptation is not a feasible solution for the long term. Next, going on to the economic section. The affirmative fails to answer the argument that adaptation creates an economic dichotomy. Adaptation is basically a rich man's game. Only the rich developed nations have the resources now, as they say, to implement an adaptation solution. Developing nations such as African countries don't have the available resources to implement solutions such as a levee around their entire country to protect against storms. And so this creates a dichotomy between the rich and developing nations. It basically shows that adaptation dooms more than half of the world population to a life mired by climate change impacts, while the rich world sits happily behind their walls. Going on to the political section. The affirmative also concedes here that if we can prove adaptation is not a politically viable solution, then we should not vote for them. And we prove this by their own argument. They say that large lifestyle changes are unpopular, and we're seeing right now that forced migrations are being done as part of adaptation solutions. And these solutions demonstrate that people are rebelling against adaptation solutions because they don't want to make these forced lifestyle changes. Whereas a mitigation solution does not directly impact, it does not affect each individual's livelihood. Adaptation will force people to get up and move out of their homes, which they don't want, clearly proving that adaptation is not a politically viable solution. On the other hand, mitigation is a politically viable solution. Solutions such as cap and trade have begun to be implemented globally. Countries such as China, India, and the EU have had cap and trade programs and are beginning to develop their cap and trade programs right now. In addition, The recent EPA poll indicates that consumers are willing to have the EPA set stricter air limits. Over 2/3 of voters are willing for the EPA to do this, which indicates that they want stricter mitigation limits right now, which shows us a political popular decision. This indicates that mitigation is not only should be done, but also could be done. And so think back to the boat example. Would you want to be on the boat that's sinking and go down with it, or do you want to plug that hole and stay alive?
Thank you.